This is what I would pitch as a modern love story. It is technically a romance novel. It, I mean, my publisher sees it as sort of like a crossover hybrid, between romance and like upmarket women's fiction. It is a story about a woman named Nicole. She's 32 years old. She has everything except for the one thing, and the one thing is a baby, and she cannot get pregnant for the life of her. And so she has left the workforce, is very, very like dedicated to just like the medical procedures, which have also not worked for her. And so she and her husband, Gabe, have moved on to surrogacy. And Nicole has she has an infertility podcast. She's just sort of completely consumed by this desire to be a mother. And that sidebar is something that I experienced. I have the same or similar infertility story to Nicole. We'll get back to that or we won't. So but I do know what it's like to have a life be so small. And what happens is she finds out, and this is like not a spoiler, this is on the back, this is page 15 information. She finds out her husband is having an affair. And so the chief question of the story is like, okay, well, like, what is she going to do now? What is she going to do now? And they have transferred an embryo to this surrogate, and she comes home, and her husband is with a woman who is not her. And so she does what I think any normal 32-year-old woman would do, which is she just gets completely plastered with her best friend, and they get drunk and they go pay an old colleague a little visit. And that old colleague is a 39-year-old advertising executive named Logan. And he is sort of the Jim Halpert of this story. He is a golden retriever. He is kind. He has been yearning. He is a misconnection that Nicole, who has been married, never got the chance to explore until now. And so now she has this opportunity to get to know this man that she always had a connection with, but her life is on fire. And then, because like, why not raise the stakes? She finds out that the surrogate is pregnant. And so we have sort of this dual story, which is, you know, this woman's attempt to pick up the pieces of her life and figure out how she's going to become a mother. And that is your B story. And your A story is like a really hard fought romance between her and Logan, who is like a really playful, healing figure in her life. And Nicole's job in this book is to sort of heal herself enough to accept love from Logan. And that takes a full cast of characters that you'll meet. So you're not only getting kind of like the hot romance that like you would want, you know, that's like swoony and he's adorable and they do fun things and like he changes her life. And yes, but she is also in screaming matches with her husband and trying to figure out what is next for her, as someone who has no income, as someone who has been lied to for 10 years, as somebody who's been betrayed by her kind of betrayed twice by her body and by her partner of a decade. And so because of that setup, the book has the ability to sort of explore all sorts of themes that you would often see in a romance novel in a different way. Because like, yeah, sex is hot, but also this is a woman who, like we said, has been betrayed twice. So like her body has been good for nothing, both for her partner and for herself. And so all sorts of things are going on that I think are the types of things that women who are my age are talking about with their friends, but we're not always seeing that representation in romance novels. Way is to be like, if you want to write a complex book, you need to let go of the idea that you can do that in a few months. And I think like, so that is like my chief piece of advice, which is like, a lot of the complexities of this book were not achieved via outline. Like they were achieved because people had conversations in a first draft or in a second draft, and then later that stuff was sculpted and deployed, you know, at just the right time. But they were not things that I was able to plan. These people had to get in a room, had to get in an argument, had to sit down and have a cup of coffee. So I think my chief piece of advice for writing interesting side characters who push your protagonist forward is to not be afraid to write scenes that you won't use. Like let them go to lunch, let them get in an argument, like let them go on a drive, let them have a conversation like you would have. Like think about a time that a friend has opened up to you and then the conversation has changed what you've done next. Usually that stuff's not planned. You're not like, come over and change my life. It's like, oh, you go on a walk and then this thing comes up and you're like, oh my God, I'm really unhappy in my marriage. What am I going to do? And it's like minute 42 that happens. So I think let characters brew. even the small ones. And I think the other thing too is like, okay, Mari is one of my favorite characters in the book, Nicole's best friend. Mari is like an insane person, but sometimes our best friends are insane people and they push us to do things. So Mari's one is like, your marriage just ended. We should go see this guy. Like, that is horrible advice, but it changes the course of Nicole's life. And then it's like, okay, when I think about characterization, it's like people cannot just do things because it serves your story. So we need to reverse engineer, how does she have the kind of friend who gives that type of advice? What kind of woman is this? And it's like, oh, and then we like, so I realized like Mari's probably, maybe Mari left her husband. Maybe she left him for no reason other than it wasn't working for her anymore. Oh, she's probably the kind of woman who wasn't happy with her career. And so instead of sitting there and being upset about it, probably like went online and found 20 places she could work and submitted her resume, right? She is a go-getter. Like, she is fearless. She doesn't care what people think. Does she want children? Like, these sorts of things. And I think like you don't need to plan all of that. I think one of the things, I read a really good book. It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. I would show it to you, but I don't know where it is. It's somewhere in my house. I have a fantastic chapter about characterization, and some of the advice they give is like, one, you don't need to plan everything, you just need enough of the character that you can see them and then they begin to reveal themselves. And I think that's huge. So like, I don't know what Nicole did the summer that she was 13, but if I had to guess, I could tell you because I know enough about who she is and how she was raised and her family that I could put her somewhere and it would make sense. And so that is what I try to get there with all of my characters. It doesn't always happen at once, but often like just taking the time to write a side scene. Like Logan has a best friend, Dave. He's only in the book a couple of times, but I wrote a scene for myself where they were playing a video game and they were talking about Nicole and they were talking about some other things that are quietly going on in Logan's life. And he is sort of pushing him on it. And it helped me figure out how Dave saw the situation. And kind of realizing like, okay, all of your side characters are actually really special because they often have more information than protagonists. Like every side character has little things. So Dave, who's this very small character in the story, is actually the only person in the story who knows everything, right? Because he has information from Logan. And Nicole withholds information from her friends. And so like he becomes sort of an interesting person to watch. So I guess I have lots of advice, but my two big ones are let them talk. And two is like figure out what makes them special, even if they're tiny, and use that to your advantage. I usually see the first few chapters of a story before I start writing it. So the best worst thing is the first novel that I have finished to completion. I had started another a year before or 6 months before. It was about nothing. It was a problem. It was all vibes, but the characters didn't know what they wanted, which turns out is a huge problem in a 400-page book. This one was a little different. I had a question, and it was like what I talked about before, and the question was, and because I had this story, I have a fantastic husband, and the question I had been playing with for years is what would have happened if he was not who I thought he was. And so I knew that needed to be explored because it was a romance novel. It couldn't be a page 200 situation. Like we needed to get her, the husband cheating is the inciting incident, right? And so I was like, what? I wanted to show as little as possible. I only wanted to show enough to break your heart. And I was like, how quickly can I do that? And the answer is like, yeah, or all I needed was page 15, right? Because so much of Nicole's story is built into like my readers would understand, right? Like if I open that up where, you know, they do a podcast, they go to a dinner, Nicole's humiliated and then he's cheating. And it's like, yeah, that's enough. Like we bring, this is like another teacher. I had a teacher, God, now I don't remember her name, my journalism teacher in high school, but she always said like, we bring to the table who we are. And I think that's true as authors, but I also believe in my readers. So I'm like, they can bring, they've been humiliated, like they've been in a relationship where they feel small. And so like, we can move quickly here. And I think like, regarding planning the beats or like my reader's going to get bored or whatever, what I do really is like I just read my book constantly. And like the reason I know it's on page 15, it's like I'm a perfectionist, but also like if I am drafting, I am constantly reading what I will not start writing without a complete understanding of what has come before. I know that's not how everybody drafts, but every 3 to 5 days I read the whole thing and I start and I if it's a first draft, I might not fix anything other than like giant developmental, like this needs to go here or whatever, or like, oh, now there's a farm stand or, you know, whatever. I won't do like line level edits. But it's really important to me that the manuscript reflect the truth of the story. Otherwise there's nowhere else to put it. The manuscript is the story. And so that's something that I feel that I need to do. And so as a result, I make things weird when I'm bored. Like I am like, okay, we've seen too much of this guy, do this. Or like, okay, things are going really, really, really well. Like things need to fall apart. And so instead of sort of like writing to an outline, I think I kind of approach it as a reader, which is like, I'm tired of this, or like things have been too good for too long, or time to show something else. And I think like with this book in particular, I used the dual timeline, and that allowed me to take a break from the narrative if it was getting repetitive, to sort of like okay, here's a better answer. If you're into music, I think it's almost like playlist curation. So an album would not be the same in a different order. And so you're like slow, slow, fast, like fast, fast, banger, slow, you know, and I think that sort of pacing belongs in books too. And it's like, oh, think about TV. TV is a great example. Think about a really good, I think Normal People is like a fantastic example because most people have seen it and read the book. 10 episodes, wonderfully paced. You can see the way the book is broken up into 10 and how the scenes play off each other when it's time to give a lot of information, when it's time to montage. So I think in order to do that, you have to zoom out and be like really willing to compress and to expand and trust your gut. And I think to some extent it's like style, but another is being like, oh, it's just hard work. Like part of it is just being like, oh, I'm going to read this again. And it's like, well, you're making art. You're going to read it again.